Welcome to the Lipoedema podcast, hosted by Shell and Tiana. Our aim is to make noise around lipedema and educate as many people as we can about this disease.
Our guest list contains professionals who work in the field and women who live with lipedema. Thank you for joining us.
Join us on this special episode as we sit down with Indiana Reid, the founder of size-inclusive lingerie and shapewear brand Naked Curve and an inspiring advocate for lipedema awareness. At just 33 years old, Indiana has already undergone 4 surgeries to combat the effects of lipedema, a condition that affects countless individuals worldwide. Through this Real and Raw podcast, Indiana will share her journey, discussing the highs and lows of living with lipedema, the challenges faced during her surgeries, and the determination that drives Indiana to raise awareness around this often misunderstood condition. Tune in to hear Indiana campaigning for change around the stigmas of lipedema and how you too can become an ally in the fight against lipedema.
My name's Tiana and we're here with Shelley and our special guest, Indiana Reid. Welcome, Indiana.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, girls.
It is our pleasure. All right, Indiana, to start with, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, where do I start? So it's always a tough one when you say, like, I want to hear a little bit about you, because my life is so vast and so exciting. It's so broad. So I don't really know where to narrow in. I'm almost 34. I work for myself. I have a business called Naked Curve, which I've been running for 6 years now. We've got a team of women all over Australia and actually a couple overseas as well. I live on the Gold Coast. I'm originally from Sydney, and I am lucky enough to be on this podcast, which is a funny story because I actually met Shell at a Journey to Worthy event, and Shell came up to me and said that she had listened to a podcast about me speaking about lipedema, and that's how she found out that she had lipedema. So it's funny how, we all have these sort of 6 degrees of separation. I don't really know what else to tell you. There's a lot more to me, but I feel like we should probably keep it lipedema specific, given this is the title of the podcast.
All right, so let's go back to that. I found out about lipedema through you on a podcast. How did you find out about it?
So I originally found out that I had it a few years ago. So let me backtrack. So I'd seen it off sporadically through social media, and I never really aligned myself with it because I had a very different shape to a lot of the shapes that I saw with lipedema. I never had the tube-like legs. I was always just quite, how do I say? I was pretty heavy in my upper legs and my arms. And so I started getting some lymphatic drainage sessions with a girl on the Gold Coast. And she said to me, maybe sort of halfway through my first session, I think that you might have lipedema. I'm not a specialist, and I think that you should go and potentially get a diagnosis. And I thought, no, there's no way. I don't have it. I've seen it. I don't have it. I know what it looks like. I definitely don't have it. I've just gotten fat. So I ended up going and doing quite a bit of research and found out there's actually no way to get a formal diagnosis. And I thought, well, this is really crazy. How can we be in Australia and not, we're a first world country. How can we not get a formal diagnosis on this condition? And I did it. Yeah. So I did a bit of research, went and saw my GP, who said they didn't know anything about it. And then I was referred to what I thought was a specialist clinic. And I went to them and I saw a doctor who said, oh, I can just tell by looking at you that you've got stage 2 lipedema. So that was the extent of my formal diagnosis. And then there was no testing done, anything like that. It was just, I can tell by looking at you that you've got it. And I thought, oh, okay, guess I've got lipedema then. And that was it 2.5 years ago now, or maybe 2 years ago.
So you didn't have pain in your legs, like you had never looked for answers for anything before that?
No, so I never had pain in my legs, but I had pain in my upper arms. So something that I noticed on myself was that I had always bruised really easily. And this is something that I just remember for forever. I've always been really active, and I just remember dropping barbells on myself, and I'd always bruise. Even if I bumped into things, I'd bruise. But my husband's a chiropractor, and he actually first said to me, I think there's something going on with you, because if he would touch my arm, even just gently, or if he wanted to like give me a massage, or it was just just gentle kind of touch, I'd scream. I'd be like, oh my God, what are you doing? That hurts so much. And that's when he was like, that's not normal. You shouldn't be in that much pain. And he worked at a clinic in Sydney at the time with physios, chiros, osteos, sports doctors, and really high up people that worked with the Sydney Swans and big sporting teams. And no one ever mentioned the word lipedema to me, even though I was surrounded by 20 specialists. No one had ever even considered to mention that. Even when I was getting regular treatments for physio, chiro, they would be treating me, and if they would start to work in my glutes at all, where I had the shelf of lipedema, I would scream, and they would say, oh, that's just your back pain setting it off, because I've got a pretty average spinal injury from many years ago. And so I just thought, okay, great. Yeah, my glutes are overworking, so they're extra sensitive. No, that's actually not the case. Lo and behold, I had lipedema.
So had your husband heard of lipedema?
No, never heard about it. And he studied for 7 years and studied all sorts of things with chiro. He's a doctor of chiropractic and did undergrad, and has learnt so much, and had never even heard of the condition, had never been told you might come across this when you see patients. Very, very interesting, because since I got the diagnosis, he has since now said to so many of his patients, hey, my wife has this condition. I think that maybe you have this condition. And what I really like about his delivery is the delivery that I received was, yeah, I can tell by how you look, you've got it. There was no empathy. It was really cold. And it was like someone had dropped a bomb on my world. I just burst into tears, because I thought, oh my gosh, this is the end. Like, this is my life. It's done. What do I do from here? So I think it's an interesting thing now to see his empathy and his delivery with something like this, and understanding that it's so much more than a physical condition, and it does affect us emotionally as well, and mentally. And it is really important to approach the lipedema diagnosis with care, and not just usual clinical, I'm a tired old doctor, I see this day in, day out, so yeah, this is what you've got, good luck.
Yeah, it's almost just like lumping it on you, isn't it? Like, you've gone in there and you know something's not quite right, but to have that just like, yep, that's what it is. Like, yeah, that's, and I think that's the hard thing. And I applaud your husband. Yay, that like the way he's going about it, he's also educating other people on it. But that's what my kids have been, because I've got teenagers, and they were the ones who sort of came to me. Once I'd listened to your podcast, they were like, oh, check out these TikTok people. And now they're like, we'll be driving somewhere and they'll be like, oh, I think that lady might have lipedema. I'm like, yeah, but you can't just go up and tell people that. Like, we have to sort of lead people, like get the advocacy out there and lead people to it. You can't just shove it at them.
I so agree with you. It's honestly like, when you buy a new car and you see them everywhere all of a sudden, but you've never seen them before. Since I got the diagnosis, I look around and I think, have I been blind my whole life? Because it is everywhere. It is literally everywhere, every day. There's never a day I go without seeing a woman that is going through this in some capacity. And I just think, what are we doing? Why can't we help more? Why is this something that people are living with and not getting any assistance with whatsoever? It's a terribly frustrating condition to have, especially in Australia.
Yep, for sure. So you spoke about that it was like your arms, you had pain in your arms, your lower back. looking back now, since getting your diagnosis, do you think there was a time in your life that it started, like, or there was progression?
Yeah, so I had the most progression I had, it started, I want to say about 5 years ago now. I actually had an ectopic pregnancy and I had never had any kind of symptoms, signs, anything before that until I had that. And after I went through that experience, my body blew up. And I'm talking, I put on close to 25 kilos in 6 months. And I have always been super fit, super active. So that for me just made no sense. I've always done really high intensity training, really heavy weights. And yeah, I just all of a sudden blew up. And I initially thought I just had these amazing quads that were building because I was like, holy crap, like my quads are getting so big. Why aren't I getting stronger though? It doesn't matter. They're getting so big. And turns out it was a fat pad growing. So not quite the muscular quads I thought I was getting.
I'm the same with my quads. I was like, I could save people in a snowstorm. Like I was so strong in my quads. And then I got the diagnosis and I'm like,
yeah. And I'm so buoyant. Well, I was so buoyant, but I've had a lot of surgery now, so I'm not as buoyant.
Yeah, I would levitate in the Dead Sea.
Yeah, I get it. I can relate.
All right.
That was a really nice segue for our chat about surgery. And I know personally I'm really interested in your surgical journey because I myself have just had my first lipedema surgery on my lower legs. So I'm sitting here trying to elevate my legs as we speak in my compression. But tell me, Indiana, let's talk about your surgery. Can you talk us through, because you've had multiple surgeries and you chose a specific 4 surgeries. There you go. So I'd really like you to dive in to your surgical journey.
Okay, so like I said, I was first diagnosed in a clinic on the Gold Coast and I was offered surgery through them at a ticket of something like $18,500 per surgery, irrespective of the amount of lipedema that was taken out of me. And that was a really confronting figure to be given, especially I couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't make sense of the fact that someone who was stage 4 and I was early stage 2 could get charged the same amount that I was being charged when I was told you will probably need 3 to 4 surgeries. And I just thought, this does I didn't go with my first person because I didn't understand the monetary side of it. So I looked a little bit further into their qualifications and found out the person that I actually got my diagnosis off was also a cosmetic surgeon and not a plastic surgeon or a specialist. And because of that, I thought, oh, okay, well, if cosmetic surgeons can be doing this, maybe I should be going down the route of a cosmetic surgeon. So I ended up going with a different surgeon who was also based on the Gold Coast at the time, who was a cosmetic surgeon and I found out previously had done surgery on my husband's ears 5 years ago, actually pinned my husband's ears back. So I went with the same surgeon that he had because I'd met him and I thought he was fantastic. And my bill came to something like $30,000 less with him. And I just felt a lot more comfortable with the people that I ended up going with. So I had my first surgery, I don't know the dates off the top of my head, but I feel like it was about 18 months ago now. And I can't pinpoint it. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I had my lowers done initially. I was supposed to have my whole leg. So from the hips down and also my arms, I was supposed to have in one surgery. However, in my first surgery, they got into my legs. They got 9 liters into my legs and we're like, that's it. We've got to cut it off because I was lucky enough that I was really healthy and strong going into surgery. So I was sort of on that borderline of we can take a little bit more, her body can handle it. Whereas a lot of people, you know, especially with this progression of this disease, don't sort of have the cardio or the strength to go into major surgery. So I was lucky. So I had 9 liters taken on a Monday, and then I went back in under general on a Thursday that same week and had my arms done. And so I ended up having 14 or 15 liters taken out in 1 week. And that was surgery. It's 2 surgeries, but that for me was my first surgery. And I was completely okay with that. I put it out to the lipedema community. What do you think about me going back in for surgery 3 days later? Because I was really nervous at first. And a lot of people had a lot of things to say. And other people were just like, just go for it. It's one recovery. If I had my time again, I would just do the one recovery. So I did it. And I'm glad I did. And I'm so glad that I had someone to help me, because I couldn't lift my arms. I couldn't eat. I couldn't drink. I could not do anything. And I share quite a bit of this on my actual Instagram. And I don't think that enough people share how rough the recovery is, because a lot of people think, yeah, I'm going to get surgery and it's all good. And it is certainly not. So that was surgery number 1 and 2. And then 6 months to maybe 9 months later, I had a smaller surgery, which was on the shelf in my bum, because in that 6 to 9 month period, I got back into CrossFit training and I noticed that I was still growing, because the second I had my first surgeries, all of a sudden I exploded in other areas of my body. And so I ended up having surgery 9 months later, and that was the shelf and a little bit in my lower stomach. I started to grow lipedema in my stomach, which I'd never had before. And then my last surgery was 10 weeks ago tomorrow. Yeah, I had my last surgery 10 weeks ago yesterday, and that was with a new surgeon down in Sydney. So this was the first surgery that I actually had to travel for. My previous 3 surgeries were all in driving distance, which was something that I didn't anticipate just how hard it would be. So I had my last surgery, which was more of a touch-up surgery, and my surgeon was a cosmetic surgeon for the 4th one, and he was brilliant. And I cannot stress enough how important I think it is to go to someone that genuinely cares about your aesthetic outcome. Because the first person that did diagnose me with surgery, I said to them, listen, I'm 33. I do really care about my cosmetic outcome. I don't just want the lipedema removed. I would like to look good as well. And they actually said to me, sorry, can you just muzzle him? They actually said to me, oh, if you want to have a good surgical outcome, you need to go to a cosmetic surgeon. And that was that was really a big alarm bell for me, because I thought, but you are a cosmetic surgeon. That's exactly what you are. So why can't you give me a good surgical outcome? And we sort of went back and forth, and they were like, well, no, we can't. We are not interested in making, the exact words were, we're not interested in making you look good. We just want to remove the diseased tissue. And I thought, ooh, that concerns me a little bit, because all this money later, you still want to look good. You still want to feel and look a little better than you did going in. And I think removing mass is good, but you still need a little sculpting as well. So they were my 4.
Yeah, I love how you highlighted the difference with some of the surgeons along your path, that they have different focuses, and that makes it all the more confusing for us. But on the flip side, it gives us more options about what's important to us. So in your instance, absolutely, with your brand, the Naked Curve, your business and everything, aesthetics is really important to you, and so it should be. You're a young, beautiful woman, and I think that that is something really important to you, and you should be able to get a great cosmetic outcome when you're spending so much money to get something like that removed. So you mentioned about getting 9 litres removed in your first surgery. Extraordinary. And some of our community have heard some whispers going on that there are new policies and regulations in place in Australia that kind of limits the amount of volume that can be taken out in one surgery. I'd really like to get your opinion on that, please, Indiana.
I do, yeah, I have certainly have some opinions on that. I also think with regards to my age and also not necessarily my business, I think it's important that I think a nice aesthetic outcome, I think, is important for a lot of women with lipedema. And I think I would probably not necessarily make that a thing that is about my brand, but more so just about what I wanted out of my life. And yeah, spending $90,000 on surgery. So coming back to what you just asked, so there was new regulations that came in from July 1. I am not an expert, so let me preface this in advance. And also all my opinions are of a personal nature and only based on my own experience. So my understanding is that the new regulations they've been put in place for patient care because there were some surgeons doing mass liposuction and things that could be considered quite dangerous. And then I remember hearing rumors around the time of my surgery as well that, sort of 10% of your body weight is the maximum you can go with. And then I'd heard, this is the thing, it's such a heavily non-regulated industry that there's just opinions left, right, and center. So no matter how much research you do, you come up against conflicting ideas and ideologies the entire time. So really, who's right and who's wrong? And I think this is why APRA's come in and done what they've done. So what I now understand is that cosmetic surgeons have a limit of 5 litres in one surgery, and plastic surgeons do not. So it is a cosmetic surgery thing. And my understanding is that the term cosmetic surgeon wasn't actually a protected term in the medical industry whatsoever. So you could call yourself a cosmetic surgeon, but just be a doctor. So you actually have no formal surgical qualifications whatsoever. And I think that is something that was quite scary, given that we face this battle of finding surgeons ourselves with very little support. I mean, Lipoedema Australia does fantastic stuff, but realistically, we really are left by ourselves to find the answers to this disease. So I think it's about transparency, and I believe that there's a lot of guidelines that have come in around marketing and what you can and can't do, because I think there are a lot of surgeons out there that are really good with their marketing, putting the words lipedema in their titles and having no actual qualifications to back what they're doing. And then some surgeons' websites will say lipedema surgery, but they have, again, no qualifications to back that whatsoever. It's like the term mummy makeover. They've now taken that away and said you cannot use the term mummy makeover because that's not correct. You have to use exact surgical terminology. So when I had my last surgery done, I had to get a letter from my GP, even though it was before the regulations, saying that I wanted to have liposuction for the removal of lipedema. So it's very specific. They have to use the actual title in their names. So this is what I understand. Again, this is based on all my own opinions and what I've read. And I believe that now, unless you have actually trained in a surgical training program at the College of Surgeons, you can no longer use the word surgeon in your title. You are a doctor. You are a cosmetic doctor. You are a lipedema doctor. And that's what my understanding is. But yeah, it will be interesting to see what comes in the next 6 months, because this has all come down fairly quickly, and it's just an interesting space to watch. And I think it's an interesting space to be in for people who haven't yet had lipedema surgery. And I think it is making it even less accessible for people who are already struggling to get this surgery that they so desperately not want, but need. And I think that's the toughest thing about lipedema, is that it's still considered cosmetic in Australia. But realistically, I didn't want any of my surgeries. I didn't want to spend $90,000 out of pocket. I didn't want to do any of that. I was just at a point of no return. And had I had not intervened when I did, I would be probably stage 3, stage 4 by now, looking at 8 surgeries, because my progression was like nothing that I could find any research on.
Yeah, amazing message. It's definitely a watch this space, isn't it, for the new regulations and guidelines. So we have a lot of people in our community that stick to conservative management. We know this disease is turned on by our genetics, and our hormonal fluctuations progress through. How are you managing your lipedema now, despite the fact that you've had surgery? What are your conservative management methods at the moment?
Do we know that that's what it's turned on by? Because I still can't find clinical data. I still am really struggling. And what I've found is that some of our biggest triggers is actually the foods that we're consuming and inflammatory diets. And if we're consuming things that are making our bodies blow up, maybe we're the root cause. Maybe we're the food that we're eating now, maybe that's got a lot more to do with it, because yeah, we've got it in our genetics, but I mean, it looks different on everyone, right? I look back and I look at my grandmother who's got it, who I didn't know had it, and this is on my father's side of the family. So I skipped a generation. And I look at my auntie and they had the tubular legs and I look completely different. So why do I had these saddlebag hips and they didn't? It's just, I don't know. It's interesting. So I definitely think food has a number, like it's our biggest thing. It was really interesting. I was listening to Shell speak about her experience with her gut, and I too have a very similar echoed experience with gut health. So at 27, I all of a sudden became lactose intolerant, and then it got worse, and then I became dairy intolerant, and I now can't even have lactose-free anything. And since that, I've been doing more research, and dairy is the number one most inflammatory thing that we can put into our body to feed our cells. It's toxic, especially if you have this kind of disease. So not having dairy is a big one for me. I try to reduce my level of gluten in general, because gluten can be quite awful for our bodies anyway. But I found one of my biggest triggers is actually sugar. So sugar makes me explode, whether it's sugar in alcohol, even fructose. It doesn't agree with me whatsoever. So I would say for me, cleaning up my diet has been a big one, but also not listening to doctors who told me to do things like aqua aerobics and low impact exercise. I was told when I got my diagnosis, you can no longer do high impact exercise. It's really important that you change up your training. And I just thought, what about my mental health? What about what is good for me? What about things that I enjoy? I said, how do you tell someone who does CrossFit to go and do aqua aerobics? Like, how that doesn't make any sense to me. So I train 5 days a week. Not recently, because I'm recovering from surgery, but training for me has been my big one. And I am the worst when it comes to compression, because I am the sweatiest human being known to mankind. I cannot wear it. I cannot stand compression. But every now and then I've got lymphatic pumps, which help, but just moving my body, exercising is the best thing you can do to make those lymphatics turn on and do what they're supposed to do.
I love that so much. Really good point. So getting your diet on point, whatever that means for you. So yes, gluten and dairy are known inflammatory parts of the normal diet. So cleaning those up is great. And I love how you mentioned that, as soon as you get this diagnosis, people say, well, back off your exercise and do low intensity exercise. But as you said, what if that's something that you love to do? What if that's something that you feel makes a difference to your health, your mental health, your physical health, and everything? Why stop something that you love just because it's almost like they're putting us in that low mobility umbrella before we get to that point.
Yep, I agree with you.
Yeah, amazing. So we're quickly running out of time, but Shelley and I, because this is such a mental mind game as well, not just a physical thing, the last question we like to ask is, if you could go back and give your youngest self a pep talk, what would you tell her?
Oh, see, that's a tough one because I didn't sort of see any of my lipedema symptoms or signs until I was late 20s. I think understanding and education is the most important thing just with women's bodies in general. And I think it's so important to let women know that we all look different and we all have a different journey. And I think, especially with lipedema, I think this is something that we genuinely need to be speaking about and making noise about, especially because it's so common. Like, this is something that we need to be learning about in primary school and in high school. And I think like most women, it's about just accepting how we are, but also maybe challenging a few things that we are told, because I believe that we are told that doctors are the be all and end all and that we know everything and they know everything. They know everything, so we need to listen to them. But I can tell you through this journey, I have spoken to a lot of doctors that I look back now and think, how on earth are you a doctor? How on earth are you the person that I'm supposed to trust wholeheartedly in and listen to this information you're giving me when it just goes so against everything that I believe in? And even just mentioning, being told to go into this low impact area of training. I mean, shouldn't exercise be number one in everything that we do? It's a tough one. I probably don't have a pep talk for my younger self because I've had a really cool life. Even with all of this, I've had an epic life. So I think just, do it exactly how you've already done it and just keep going. But I'll let you guys sign off because I can see that you've got minutes to go before we get cut off.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Indiana. It has been awesome having you. And as I was really nervous because you're like my idol, because you're the one who led me on this path. So I'm like, Tiana, I'm so nervous.
Oh, you're so funny.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, and good luck with everything.
Thank you so much. And I'm so thankful that you invited me on here. And I'm going to send you guys both a podcast a YouTube video that I was lucky enough to be sent a little while ago about things that we can do eating-wise to starve lipedema and lymphedema. That's actually by an American, what's his name? He's an American professor, and it's the most brilliant, life-changing thing that I watched since getting my diagnosis. And I think if you ladies were to share this, I think a lot of people will get a much better understanding of the connections between leaky gut, lipedema, and all these other underlying gut conditions that seem to be directly connected to lipedema.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks for having me, ladies.
No worries.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Lipoedema podcast. Lipoedema and its symptoms vary from individual to individual. The opinions and advice voiced on this podcast are of a personal nature and used for educational purposes.
Please take away from this podcast what resonates with you, and please see your GP or preferred specialist for diagnosis and healthcare. We are Shelley and Tiana from the Lipoedema podcast. Until our next episode, bye for now.